Welcome everyone to Living with the Times. The first verse of our Torah portion for this week, Vayera, says, Vayedaber Elokim el Moshe, V'yomer elav, Ani Hashem. The name Yud Kei Vav Kei. So many people just pass over this verse as an introduction to what is going to come after. That God speaks to Moshe saying, I am God, and then continues. But actually, this is one of the most important verses in the whole Torah. Because if we really look at it, it's almost like saying, Moshe says to Reuven, I am Shimon. What do you mean you're Shimon? You're Moshe. So here it says, Vayomer Elokim, the name Elokim, and then it says, I am Yud Kei Vav Kei. So this is one of the most important ideas in the Torah. Here we have two different names of God. They represent two, in a sense, very, very different energies. And yet we're saying that they are one. The name Elokim is Gematria HaTeva, the aspect of nature. And the name Elokim is always represented by the forces of nature. That's why in the creation of the world, only the name Elokim appears 32 times. It's the creation of nature. Whereas the name Yud Kei Vav Kei represents a more transcendent energy. This is called in Kabbalah that God surrounds all worlds, where Elokim represents that God fills all worlds. But this verse is saying that these two aspects are the same. There's a verse that says, Shemesh u'magen Hashem Elokim. The sun and its shield is Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim. In other words, the source of the light is the sun, and the rays of the sun are, of course, totally connected to it. So the sun, metaphorically, is the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. And the rays of sun, the light that we experience, is the name Elokim. So here we're being told that they are one. This is the secret of the Shema. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, which is really saying Hashem Elokim. Hashem Echad. God is one. Elokim is always represented by the force of Gevura, strength, nature, order, judgment, might. And Yud Kei Vav Kei is associated with chesed, with loving kindness and compassion. But here we see that both of these aspects, which sometimes we relate to as being very, very different, especially in experiences in our own life, but we're told that they're ultimately one. So this idea appears in two very important places. The first is in the time of Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, when the king and queen had introduced idol worship, the worship of Baal, and the people fell for it. And people were abandoning Judaism. And Elijah was quite desperate to turn things around. So he created what's called the Contest of the Gods, that he invited 400 priests of Baal to Har Carmel up by Haifa and said, let's prove who the real God is. We'll put a sacrifice on an altar, and whoever can bring fire down from heaven that will prove to the people who the real God is. And it was like in the Colosseum. The seats were full to say who is the real God. And Elijah even said, you go first. And so the 400 priests of Baal did what they did all day long. They prayed, invocations, black magic, white magic, whatever. They could not bring fire down from heaven. Excuse me. Towards the end of the day, Elijah says, okay, it's my turn. And it says that he prayed a short prayer and brought fire down from heaven. And when the people saw this, it like shocked them back into understanding who the real God is. And they exclaimed spontaneously, Hashem hu ha'elokim. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is Elokim. Just like in our verse. But it was very spontaneous. It was like a epiphany. Hashem hu ha'elokim. The other place where this appears is at the end of Yom Kippur. The end of the last prayer of Yom Kippur, Nila, where people pour out their hearts. The idea of Ne'ilah, symbolically, the gates of judgment are about to close, and everyone wants to get in their last prayers, heartfelt prayer to God. And at the very, very end, the one leading the service usually yells out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God, our God, God is one. And everyone in the congregation responds, and sometimes it's like very powerful. And then 3 times, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. 3 times that the name of God is glorious for all generations, for eternity. And then 7 times, this is the very end of Ne'ilah, everyone yells, Hashem hu ha'elokim, 7 times. And it's like the room is shaking from the spiritual energy. And that, in essence, is not only the high point of Yom Kippur. Remember, Yom Kippur is after 10 days of tshuva, from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur. But here, the fact that we yell Hashem hu Elokim 7 times, this is the ultimate consciousness to understand that everything is one. And even though we experience many judgments, many trials, many obstacles, many traumas, things that don't go right, and every person in their own way. But ultimately, it's all an expression of God's love and concern. And the idea of Hashem hu Elokim, this is stated in the first verse of our Torah portion of Va'era. And I just want to bless all of us that we don't have to wait till Yom Kippur after 10 days of intense tshuva, or at the time of Elijah the prophet, that we don't need a contest of the gods to understand the oneness of God, as we say in the Shema every day. Hashem Elokeinu. These 2 names of Elokim and Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, they are one. It's all one. May we be blessed to have this consciousness.